Welcome, everyone. I call the June 18, 2025 Planning Commission meeting to order. The main purpose of tonight's meeting is to conduct a study session on the affordable housing amendments. Before we move on to agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our hybrid meeting format. The City of Bothell is providing the option to attend this meeting either in person or remotely via Zoom. Those participating via Zoom, the chat and question functions are not available for use to ensure compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. We have a public comment agenda item at the beginning of the meeting. Please limit all comments to 3 minutes. Please note that the City of Bothell does not tolerate verbal harassment. Please remember this during your comments. Also, as we are in election season, I'd like to remind everyone of certain campaign-related restrictions regarding public comment on campaigns and/or ballot measures. Public speakers generally cannot specifically address a campaign or ballot measures at a public meeting or during the public comment period. RCW 42.17a.555 prohibits government agencies from allowing the use of public facilities either directly or indirectly for campaign purposes. Allowing speakers to speak in favor of or in opposition to a ballot measure or campaign during a public meeting or during a public comment period would violate this prohibition. Public comment will be allowed both in person and via Zoom. Those wishing to comment via Zoom were asked to submit an online form by 3 p.m. today. People wishing to submit written comments were also asked to submit those comments by 3 p.m. Email was encouraged as well and will be acknowledged. Those in attendance may also make comments and have been asked to indicate their desire to comment on the sign-in sheets. The Imagine Bothell notice, city website, and tonight's agenda all provided information for the public for providing comments. Video of this meeting will be streamed live as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone and listen live to the meeting. For our phone-in callers, during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which material they are referencing so that everyone can follow along. At this point, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the attendance of the commissioners. Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Westerbeck? Here. Oh. Commissioner Lever?
Here.
Commissioner Robson?
Here.
Commissioner Sills is absent and excused, and Commissioner Gustafson?
Here, thank you.
And in addition, staff in attendance include Deputy Community Development Director Gates and Jacqueline Sampson, Planner with Community Development. Lastly, before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. If you are also streaming the live video feed, please turn off the sound as there is a delay. At specific breaks in the presentation, I'll be calling on members who wish to speak or ask a question. If you want to speak, please indicate this by raising your hand, and I will call on you as I see you. This will help avoid the problem of having two people speaking at the same time. Identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion, second a motion, or participate in debate, and please mute your microphone when not speaking. First item on the agenda is public comment. The city has accepted visitor comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. We have not received any written comments. There is no one in the audience, and is there anyone in the Zoom room? All right, so that noted, no public comments today. We will move on to the next agenda item, which is the approval of the May 21 minutes. Is there a motion to approve the May 21 minutes?
Commissioner Lever moves to approve.
Okay, it's been moved that we accept the May 21 minutes. Is there a second?
Commissioner Westerbeck, I second the motion to approve the minutes.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes. Any discussion or corrections to the minutes as noted? Looking around, all in favor of the minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
And the minutes are accepted as presented. Moving along to our principal agenda item, it is the affordable housing amendments, and I will turn this over to staff at this point. Pulling up our screen.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Glad to be here again tonight. We're going to continue on the conversation regarding affordable housing and some future updates as we move through these next few months, next several months towards the end of the year. We'll keep on this as part of the broader housing action plan work, but felt it was important to kind of come back tonight with some of the feedback we've heard, asking a few other clarifying questions on some new items, and really set ourselves up. The aim is to set ourselves up with some good direction as we move into the fall, especially after our break in August. So Jacqueline's going to get us started, and we've got a series of slides and questions to run through, and should be good.
Hello, everyone. We'll get started. So for Planning Commission action, there is no action is required tonight. We're just planning on providing Planning Commission some information about the Affordable Housing Code and potential amendments in order to get some feedback from y'all. And here are our discussion questions for today. We have this later on in the presentation as well, so once we get to that slide, we can have a discussion later. All right, so feedback from Commission and Council. On May 7th, we met with Planning Commission on initial housing incentives. There was general support for overall direction, with particular attention to how fee reductions would impact public work revenues. There was also interest in ensuring small developers could benefit from the incentives and a request for tracking affordable units produced as we move forward. We took that feedback to Council on May 20th. And they were also supportive overall. Some reservations were made about parking reductions, especially since the upcoming state legislation would make that less of a useful tool. And then Council expressed eliminating off-street parking requirements. And yesterday we held the Phase 2 code updates public hearing on the code where we would actually eliminate those off-street parking requirements. We're going to come back to City Council on July 8th for a final ordinance on the Phase 2 code updates, and once adopted, would eliminate parking reductions as a tool that could be used for housing incentives. City Council also asked staff to study cities like Portland or even internationally that have successfully used inclusionary zoning and incentives, and MFTE expansion was another area of strong interest. So as we've seen across the region, housing costs in Bothell have continued to rise since the city adopted its housing strategy in 2018. In 2020, 27% of all households were cost burdened, meaning that they spent more than 30% of their income on housing. Over 2,000 of those were severely cost burdened, spending over half of their income on housing. Renter households are particularly affected with over 41% cost burden compared to 19% of homeowners. And while overall cost burden is fairly similar across racial groups, Hispanic and Latino households are more likely to fall in that cost burden range, particularly spending between 30 to 50% of their income on housing. Bothell has seen steady growth in new housing, mostly single-family homes, townhomes, and market-rate apartments. But on their own, these types of housing won't meet the needs of lower-income residents. And the 2024 Comprehensive Plan sets a goal to create capacity for 12,782 new homes over the next 20 years. And what's different this time is that we're also playing for affordability, not just the total units. And then more than 75% of those new homes, about 9,550 units, need to be affordable to households earning 80% of the area median income or less, as you can see within that graph over there. Cities in Washington are authorized under state law to create affordable housing incentive programs. To implement a mandatory program, the regulations must apply in areas that support growth goals. They offer meaningful incentives like zoning or parking relief and demonstrate that the added development capacity is feasible. In Bothell, we currently have both mandatory and voluntary voluntary, there we go, that's how you say the word, voluntary affordable housing provisions in limited areas, downtown and Canyon Park. We also offer MFDE or multifamily tax exemptions in downtown, but participation has been limited in part because the program is small in scale and geographically constrained, and that's something we're working to address. So some potential new incentives, though these are some examples on the screen. To jumpstart affordable housing production and expand our current tools, we're looking at a menu of different new incentives, and we're also evaluating with Arch and their consultant on incentives, and we'll be back in the fall to continue this conversation as well.
Okay, so the staff briefing memo talked a little bit about sort of where we currently have affordable housing requirements or voluntary or mandatory requirements, what the threshold could be, or what it could look like. We also touched briefly, and I'll run through all of these about the MFTE program and how we are updating that. I also do want to provide some reflection on the middle housing conversation we had with City Council earlier this month, and then sort of wrap all of this up with what it all means with new legislation, particularly the Housing Accountability Act that was passed this recent legislative session, and then how it aligns with the housing targets from the comp plan. So currently, in the city, there are just these two areas, the bright green, forgive the park property below or around the river, but the bright green on both of these for downtown on the left, Canyon Park on the right, those zones have an affordable housing requirement to some degree, which make up about 4% of the city's zoning that allows for residential. So I wanted to peel away all the other zones, parks and agricultural and anything else, and just really look at zones that allow for residential, because that's really what we're focusing on here. Where we have it required now, that small amount in the memo talked a little bit about potentially expanding that, and that's one of the questions that we'll get into a little bit later, but sort of by the numbers, here's how we could approach it. There's other opportunities. We started with the RM3, as that's the 60 unit per acre maximum, 30 unit per acre minimum zoning. The RM3, 4, and then the RAC, they make up a wide variety of all the zones throughout the city that allow for residential multifamily. And then there are a few other zones. You'll see there's a couple within downtown that don't have that requirement. Look to expand that throughout the downtown, and then all the other mixed-use zones within Midtown or North Creek that are not picked up within that underlying residential activity center zoning. If we went with this initial approach, it would increase the amount of zones that allow for residential up to 32% of the city. The remainder is the lower density residential, those RL1s, 2s, the RAC, the residential conservation, those large areas up by North Creek and then down along the Norway Hill slope, and then the RM1 and 2. So those were kind of just an initial touch. We can always come back and show you what it would mean if we added more, added less. And really just look to see what this geography might begin to include as we move into the fall and we have the data back from Arch and their consultant on what incentives may be. That can help kind of piece together all of this as far as what are those incentives, especially since development in the RM3 probably 2, 3, or 4 may be geared more towards those smaller to medium-sized developer projects that Planning Commission wanted to make sure we focus on. So we could look to expand into other zones based on what we hear as far as what those incentives may be and where there's opportunity to create some of those offsets. We brought this list to City Council. It is by no means a complete list, just to paint a picture of what is out there in the city. We've got a lot of affordable housing units that have spanned a good number of years, going back to 1968. But you'll see there's really not that much that has been built within the past several years. Has not taken the opportunity or have been was required through the mandatory provisions. So what we want to do is make sure that we can start to grow this list and start to see, maybe not large 50s or 60 number of units, but piecing together as many units as we can throughout the next 20 years. So our report out at the 5-year mark for comprehensive plan update can begin to show that. We also brought this slide to council just to give a picture of what the other jurisdictions around us do. My intent here is to show the percent of units, sort of the threshold. Where do these other cities set that amount? In the memo talked about 1 per 10, so 10% of the units seems to be pretty universal. Kenmore, I do believe, recently upped this, and I will say there is a caveat to all this as everyone is moving through their housing action plans and the housing work following the comprehensive plan. We were a little bit ahead of the game establishing our new zoning. Some cities are wrapping that up this week, if not next, to align. But then we'll still be working through their affordable housing codes to make sure that those are set up. We have to ask ourselves, if 10% of the units that are created have to be affordable, but we need to create 75% at 80% or less, how do we do that? And that's a big puzzle piece. I think we all understand that there's going to have to be some significant subsidies and availabilities through the state or through public partnership development that can start to fill in those larger gaps. But this is at least a starting point as far as the conversation. This is intended to sort of bring us back to last November when we saw this slide several times throughout the fall to go through those income bands. For reference, so far this year, there have been 92 completed or certificate of occupancies issued for residential units within the city. It's about 1% of our 20-year goal. None of those have deed restrictions on them, so they're all presumed to be within the 100 to 120% or greater AMI. So we want to make sure that we can set something up that's going to start to tick away incrementally at those 50 to 80 primarily. We'll find out how we can get the 0 to 30s, and the 100 to 120 will generally take care of themselves. We have a lot of projects that are already in the pipeline, a lot of plats that have been designed, and they're not likely to be changed. So we'll see those single-family projects that will come in and knock those numbers down. Part of what we'll do is through the tracking, through the annual tracking as well as the 5-year look back, we'll see, as every other jurisdiction is going to see, what's being built, what have we all done, are we heading in the right direction, and then anything that we do here in these next several months, creating updates to our code, will fall under the new 5148 Senate bill that passed this past legislative session, which is the Housing Accountability Act, where there's a higher threshold where these will all go to Commerce. They'll be looking at it similarly to how we brought our housing element and how we were trying to achieve these targets within the comprehensive plan. We anticipate that type of a review will occur, and we'll get comments back from those organizations that we receive comments from during the comp plan update related to housing and land use. So that's a little bit of an unknown what that looks like. We do welcome those comments and that direction that could come out of those discussions, but we just want to make sure we're setting ourselves up for some good updates that lead to progress. one of the last slides that we brought to council back in May was just a snapshot of what we have seen. So when we took a look at rents within downtown or outside of downtown, what we could find were just one type of unit, the studio in downtown with rentals that were within the 80%, the 60 to 80% band. So that's the green slide, and all the other units, 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom, were above that. And that was both for in downtown or outside of downtown, new, recently finished construction projects. Not to be named, but just easy way to search through what are we seeing out there. Because we don't have deed restrictions on file for any of those units, we had to kind of hunt and find out what's out there. So our concern would be that if we don't do anything, we'll continue to see this pattern. We want to try to bend that a little bit and increase those or fractions of it within the 60 to 80%, 50 to 80%. The last thing, just for Planning Commission to be aware of, we brought, as we were requested to bring back based on the resolution from last March from City Council, a draft middle housing code to consider what step we could take to achieve essentially what a tier 1 city would have for middle housing. Currently, we have the 2 units for most of our zones, and then up to 4, whether it's within a quarter mile of a high transit, major transit stop, or if it's providing 1 affordable housing unit. Council had asked us to provide a code that would look at increasing that to 6. The easy column is if you're within a quarter mile of transit, you can do up to 6 with no requirements for affordable housing, or if you are outside of that quarter mile, 2 of those 6 would be affordable units, following the state's definition of 60% for rental or 80% for purchase. Council did ask us to up the base, the current base, so we're still kind of working through this with the base units going up to 4, with the opportunity to go to 6. We put it together this way with keeping the current base in order to not lose out on 4-unit projects that would have 1 affordable unit. So if our thought was if we went to a 4-unit base in the RL1, for example, we would only see affordable units if somebody were providing deed restricted affordable units if someone were providing 6. So would we only see 4-unit projects over and over and over again? We'll come back to them through the fall with additional information, but just wanted to make sure you were aware of kind of how this was looking, and we'll circle back with you all as well, because we'll want to have you weigh in as well. Next steps, input from tonight, kind of keeping this conversation going will help us refine how the regulations progress through the fall. It will also inform the housing action plan and the policies that we're going to be setting. So we'll come back and try to make it clear that we're either talking about the housing action plan policy and strategies, or if we're going to be talking about multifamily tax exemption, middle housing code, affordable housing code. So those are sort of the broad housing action plan overarching policy material, or those 3 code topics. Again, no action, just looking for any additional input and direction, and I will leave these questions up, and I can always jump back through previous slides as needed.
Commissioner Lever?
Thank you, Commissioner Lever. Here, I have a question about process. So it is my understanding that through input that was gathered from community during the planning process, all of the, I guess, the planning or the decisions that are made are based on that feedback. But as we're really finding, or we're getting into the details of the how we're gonna do it, how are you incorporating additional feedback to potentially make these incentives more appealing to developers and or for the communities that are unable to live here? Like, what are some of the housing needs that they may have as it relates to what are we trying to build that will capture the, is it like the family sizes that are larger or smaller? So from a process perspective, where are we in terms of really gathering the detail at kind of like targeted, like focus group level?
Yeah, so we just, last night, council approved the engagement contract for the downtown and housing action plan work to begin. So they'll be working with Ray on the housing action plan, Ray and Jacqueline on the housing action plan, with Eric on the downtown sub-area update work. And they have both general and targeted tasks within their approach to seek out groups, various groups, depending on if it's downtown. So, okay, downtown residents, that's a targeted group. And downtown businesses, that's probably another targeted group. We'll work through what that really looks like. For housing, will benefit from downtown residential current residents. But for the housing action plan, we can seek out population groups within or around the region that we want to kind of build that through. So that's being planned out. Well, once the contracts are all signed, we'll begin that work. But that will help add to the policies that have already been set within the comprehensive plan that we know the community wanted as far as plan for this growth with these targets, and establish, how to incorporate affordable housing so it's housing for all, and we can create a place where folks that maybe couldn't afford to live in this community can move and live here. So we'll use that as our guiding principle, our guiding policies to build upon those with additional policies and strategies within the housing action plan that we will kind of suss out through that engagement. And we'll be coming back through the fall with, here's what we're hearing, here's who we're connecting with, and how that will all work. So that'll be how we proceed with the process of additional or the next level of engagement, and then how that will come back and feed into the work here with what does it look like in the details of the code. The strategies, the policy strategies, and the code.
Thank you. I had another question related to the data. So the demographic information share on the rental burden and all of that, is that just for Bothell or that included the regional? Like, so I know whatever information was provided, I'm kind of curious. And then if it is just Bothell, how does that compare with more like at a regional scale? Are we better off, worse off than in region, meaning like at a county level or a state level? So your data, I'm just curious.
It is Bothell data that we've pulled, and if there's new information, we've added it since the comprehensive plan. But we can come back with kind of how we align within the region at our next meeting.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Westerbeck?
Of course I have comments, but I was going to let other people speak first. Commissioner Westerbeck here. I want to kind of create some context. I was looking at the math earlier. 9,500 units under 80% in 20 years. That's 475 finished units per year. That's roughly a 6 Oaks and a Junction, I think, maybe, or 2 6 Oaks, something like that, worth of housing, finished every single year for 20 years. This is like a hair on fire. Like, that's just under 80%. I don't know, you guys have to give me stats. I don't recall them. I mean, I don't know if we're probably doing 475 a year altogether, apartments, houses, and everything. Maybe it's a lot more than that. Maybe it's thousands. I don't know. So I just feel like we're going to have to get really serious about whatever we're doing to hit that 80% mark, 475 units a year. As someone who does this work, I've seen the Seattle program, MHA. People have probably better stats than me, but I have a friend who works in the mayor's office and looks at this stuff. And the MHA program has been really difficult. They've have a massive reduction in the number of people taking advantage of particularly small and medium-sized projects. It's just a graph that just goes down. Bigger projects are participating, but smaller ones aren't. It's actually been a huge damper on production of smaller, medium-sized buildings and units. So it's really just killed development. I'm sure construction costs and interest rates and stuff like that are part of that too. But it's been a precipitous drop, and it's a recognized problem in Seattle. And we're headed for that if we impose these on everyone. So I really like, and I personally would respond very well to an incentive program. If someone said, because I've mentioned this in past meetings, as someone who builds these, I really want to do stuff that's naturally affordable. I think it'd be great. As long as you can get a bank loan for it and you don't lose money, I feel good about doing that kind of project. But right now, just the cost of a unit, just to build it, is really impacts how much you can rent or sell it for. So to me, the incentives and just saying like, we'll give you an extra height, densities, some places it's an issue, some places it's not. Everything in our list, particularly speed through permit, because time is money when you're sitting on land or whatever as a developer. And then impact fees and things like that drive up the cost per unit. I think those should all be thrown up and looked at seriously, as we would like to incentivize you to build these units and keep them naturally affordable, instead of telling someone that this particular neighborhood is covered with this overlay, which I think, in my experience in seeing other cities like Seattle and others as well, inclusionary zoning forced on areas tends to dampen development more than create development, because they just go to another neighborhood or another spot. They'll even go to another city. So I think we need to look really hard at how can we make it so attractive that someone says, "Oh, I'm going to get 3, 4, 5 different things: multifamily tax exemption, the parking reduction or elimination." I think is going to be a big deal for certain projects that are downtown and in your transit services. It's going to really reduce costs to build and get more units on a lot. So I'm really bullish on that approach, because I think it's going to get us more units faster. So speed through permit, that's going to lower costs. And we've got examples. Just a few I came up with off the top of my head that I read about regularly: Austin, Texas; Minneapolis, Minnesota; New Zealand. But there was another city recently I was reading about. They're starting to see rental rates go down because they're actually building enough housing. They just flood the market, and that tends to push rents down. So the more we can just free people up to build, which we did an incredible jump on by doing our new development regulations. I still just so appreciate all the work staff did to bring us those development regulations last year. It was just heroic work. It's awesome. I think it's going to really move the needle. So anyway, just making it easy to build, safe housing, but more of it close in with fewer roadblocks. I will put a plug in for when the single stair amendment is finally finished, the building code that was passed by the legislature a couple years ago, that each city has to adopt that. I'm already talking, kind of gently nudging Director Greenspan to get the building official to adopt that as soon as it's possibly, as soon as we're able to, because single stair, sprinkled buildings are around the world proven to be very safe. There's a lot of being written on that right now. It's kind of catching on around the country, but in my building, single stair, that's going to really unlock a lot of small lots that we're focusing on as part of our middle housing and infill efforts to unlock these smaller lots. A single stair versus 2 saves a tremendous amount of money and floor plate. Elevators are a whole other issue. I won't get into that, but we're trying, the legislature's been working on making it easier to make small elevators, which would get make a lot more buildings accessible, but that's maybe going to come back next year because it wouldn't be as expensive to put a smaller, internationally recognized elevator in a unit. So you don't just have to have ground-related units for accessibility then. That's also going to unlock a lot of small lots. Last point I want to make is the challenge with the mandates is you've got 1 to 2 units required affordable out of 4 or 6. They still have to build those at current rates, interest rates, construction costs, and everything. So they're going to lose money on those. And they may want it, someone like me, like, I really want to do that, but I can't go in the red on it. I won't get to build the project. So how can I make that work? It works really well with a 200 unit, 300 unit building. You can do 10 or 20%, and it's not too bad. It can be offset. But a small project really is impacted. So throwing those, as many of these incentives at it as we can, I think is going to be really important to get us closer to those 475 units a year for 25 years, or 20 years. Anyway, I might have more to say, but those are the points I had that I really wanted to bring up. Thanks.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Gustafson.
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here. Thank you to the staff for making sense of a lot of legislative activity that feeds into what's going on here. I definitely agree with Commissioner Westerbeck that inclusionary zoning makes sense at higher levels, like 20 units or more, but not at 4 or 6 units. And it seems that we do not have the requirement to do inclusionary zoning to meet the HB 1220 goals. We can do whatever mix of credible alternatives would get us closer to our affordable housing goal. Rental assistance that I think we're already doing, streamlining permits using MFTE. So it's not a requirement to do inclusionary zoning. I would like to make sure that my understanding is correct, though. If staff could weigh in on that assumption, that would be great. Thank you.
Is the question if it's a requirement under HB 1220 to have an inclusionary zoning?
Yes, because it seems like it's being presented as a requirement, but it doesn't seem like it needs to be a requirement. Is that true?
It seems as though, based on what we're seeing, there is a need to have it as a required standard for, but it's different for each jurisdiction. So this is where it gets tricky. There's no state mandated must be X percent of any project greater than Y units. So we have to create something that is set up to aim for those targets. And as we learn through the years, and as all jurisdictions are, especially after the 5-year look back, if everyone is on a trajectory that is well below, we'll see what happens. And well below a very high, even without affordable housing, that's a very high number of residential units to create. If it's, in the 400 to 500 a year completion for a city like Bothell. So there is a need to explore how we can set ourselves up to accomplish deed restricted affordable housing. And then we'll start to see, what happens with, the pricing. Is there does natural affordability bring down average rents? Do average rents decrease down to a point that they start to tick the boxes of the 80 to 100? That would be amazing if it happened, across the state, across the region. So we believe that there's the tools that we need to build upon include a mandatory affordable housing and inclusionary zoning mechanism, and kind of how that is sized right for Bothell is what we're trying to work through here. So.
Commissioner Jones?
Thank you. I want to also express strong support for these incentives. I wanted to make one comment and then ask a question. And so the comment is just that I hope that the incentives support affordable housing across the city of Bothell and not just clustered in a few key locations. So that's a comment. And then the question is what is the city's strategy for affordable housing in terms of both renter occupied and owner occupied dwellings? And I'm asking that because I think we all would agree that there are some benefits, considerable benefits to owner occupied housing in terms of wealth creation, which is something that if we are able to provide those opportunities for those on the lower income levels, we will have done something pretty important. I'm sure it's very difficult to do, but I am curious as to the overall strategy. I'm hearing about an incentive here, middle housing here, this here, but I'm not sure that I'm hearing what the overall strategy is.
Exactly, and that's what the housing action plan that we aim to complete this year will get into the details. And so hearing that from you is, moving forward on something along those lines is to, prioritize it. The question that I'd say, is then prioritizing fee simple, deed restricted units. Is that a priority? Should that be prioritized? And how could we, once we learn through our incentive evaluation assessment, are there some levers to use to make it so that a condominium development with units or cottages or individual or duplexes, individual residences or duplexes for sale, if that is a priority, then we can work through that with what those strategies would be, and building upon the strategies, the policies of the comp plan to hit the targets more specifically than just produce this number. It's produce this number in what shape or form. So that's the work that we're going to be continuing to go down and embark on in the fall as we hear back from the community through the engagement. And I know Jacqueline was typing, so I know she's noted it, and it's things that we want to make sure we're capturing in how we move forward with the housing action plan. What is the makeup of affordable units, and how do we, set our policy goal to accomplish that? To build that individual wealth through home ownership, and get that firm footing to ideally move beyond that and let someone else come into that home. So yes, it's on our plan.
Thank you very much. As Commissioner Jones, I just want to thank you for that thoughtful answer and for just the overall planning effort. And just to emphasize that it's going to be so important for us to understand those priorities, not just from the developers, but from those who are interested in living in the city of Bothell and really improving their lives as part of the community. And so I really appreciate that, along with the engagement and outreach and all the feedback that you're going to get. This fall is going to be exciting to see some of this working forward. It's really, really progressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Robson here. I wanted to just sort of piggyback on what Commissioner Jones was talking about regarding owner-occupied housing. One thing I've really noticed in my very small neighborhood is a really rapid increase on investors coming in to buy, which is really keeping home prices very high. And that includes even apartment buildings. The apartment building in my neighborhood, the apartments, even though they're building more apartments, it just means more opportunities for investors. And it's not keeping the prices of the apartments in my neighborhood are not lowering. On the contrary, they're going up. It's just that ordinary humans are not able to buy them anymore. And so I share Commissioner Jones's concern that we will be building affordable apartments that'll be just a screaming deal for investors, and but essentially out of reach for all kinds of reasons for ordinary people just trying to get themselves a home. And I know right now we're just talking about construction and it's ownership and who's buying those things, but I'm wondering about how that relationship goes together, because we can, as I was saying, we can build all kinds of things and put in all kinds of great, affordable benefits with them. How are we ensuring that those affordable apartments are actually going to lower income people, if that makes sense?
That would be through, a deed restriction. So something on title that says this unit within this building or these units within this building can only be rented out to those earning 60 to 80 or 80 to 100 or whatever the amount is. And that's managed generally by the property owner through the application process, and it is regularly audited to just make sure, yes, this is happening. Same for purchase and sale, where if it's listed, then yes, and it's a lot easier when it's on a fee simple and it's on title. Everyone sees it when they're going through that purchase process. So that would be how we would track that and see that it's there.
Well, somewhat along the lines of Commissioner Robson's comment, there was a recent story in the Seattle Times about the difficulty some existing affordable housing projects are having staying in business. I don't know if everyone saw that, but costs to maintain those units are rising, and City of Seattle is now having to focus on investing some of their resources in maintaining these units rather than building new ones. It was in the last week or so, and it's certainly worth taking a look at if people haven't seen it. Could you scroll back to the slide on the local jurisdictions? Yeah, right there. Do you have a sense for when their requirements went in place and how effective they've been in bringing units on?
I can speak to where I've previously worked. The city of Kirkland had mandatory 10% of all units within their multifamily zones. So anything that was, let's see, a minimum lot size of 3,600. So kind of like what our RM1 is now. And that was in place since the late 90s when that began, and it's kind of grown. I think mid 2000s it expanded a little bit, and so you would see, 1 of 10, or there were opportunities for fee in lieu for a fraction of a unit. You didn't have to build the unit. You wouldn't build a fraction of a unit. You would put that into the housing trust fund, and that's how it would circle around to jurisdictions, and how SAMA was built, how projects like that receive a lot of their funding. So a lot of these have been in place for a good number of years, the last 20 or more years, and they produce anywhere, depending on the scale or the size of the city. We can come back with sort of what we can at least find out as far as how many units have been created. Even with these, I think these jurisdictions are all examining, what should we do? Should we increase the percentage? How do we make sure we're achieving these targets for affordable units? So I don't think it's the end all be all, the one way to do it. I think there's other opportunities with other strategies that we're all going to have to explore.
Okay. Well, I've often been a skeptic of fee and lieu, particularly in open space, but I think in housing, there is an opportunity there. Because as you said, you can't build a fraction of a unit. So if you drop the floor on where it applies and it would give you a resource to be able to do more. So I'd suggest taking a look at that. Other comments? Commissioner Lever?
Yes, so my comment is around my support for more incentives and also sort of my concern with how planning processes work in general. Like we typically we have to zoom into one item and then really hyper focus on it. And then there's so many other things that impact the housing component. And I know it's not perfect, but I do want to make sure that we're also cautious about being overly prescriptive on what it means to locate affordable housing in a particular area and or also restrict the income that will come into a unit, because I've seen just firsthand what it means when we're solely looking at the income, and really that prevents the incentive for potentially stay in place and increase your income, and also the maintenance component. I also want to bring to attention to the group here is the role that government has played to make this a possibility, because when we think about the profit that developers are making, that is something that we cannot control. And at the same time, when it comes to serving those who are marginalized, it may not really work for the for-profit sector. So then this is where we sort of take over, we meaning like government entities. And I really wonder, like, where are we as a state or region when it comes to, again, I bring the housing authorities quite a bit in here, because with all the mixed development that they have, kind of really understanding what are the trends and then what's happening at the federal level. There's just so many things that are creating barriers to creating affordability. And I really think we will do a disservice by being overly prescriptive. So the more adaptable we can be, the more pilot programs that we can have, that will be something that I believe we'll benefit from, as we'll have to really flex as things really become incredibly challenging as we're seeing it. And the other thing that I do want to bring forward is just really thinking of scenarios around, like, even the cost of labor with the immigration changes that are happening, and then who happens to be in the construction sector as well. And I would be amiss if I didn't mention that. So there's so many other things at play that if we just hyper focus on, we need to make you do this and that, without really looking at the big scale. So I really would like us to be very flexible and open and nimble. So thank you.
Other comments? Commissioner Gustafson.
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here. I'd like to address the first discussion question. Is there interest in adjusting the zone subject to required affordable housing? And I think I'm hearing that there is interest in changing some of the guidelines here. I did find the bill report on HB 1220, and inclusionary zoning is listed as one of a basket of 6 to 8 options. So it does seem that cities have a lot of flexibility to decide what mix works for them. So if we do decide to do inclusionary zoning, I think we can refine and adjust and pinpoint it towards the goals that Commissioner Jones described. Instead of doing 4-plexes and 6-plexes, we could direct the inclusionary zoning towards building deed-restricted owner-occupied homes and subdivisions and affordable rental homes in larger 20-plus developments. Can we make that change to the recommendations right now?
We can take in any recommendations at this point and use those as we move forward, and come back with what we hear, and build those into not only the housing action plan and those strategies, but what the code might look like. So kind of doing two things at once, in a sense.
Thank you.
Others? Commissioner Westerbeck?
Commissioner Westerbeck here. I will comment, it might have been Commissioner Lever who mentioned this, that, or others, I can't remember, it doesn't matter. The idea that we allow these broadly and not just in targeted areas, that we create this basket of incentives. And I'd say the more the better. Like, it'd be great if it was just an a la carte. Like, they might have different impacts and they get you different things. And I'm not sure quite how that matrix would work yet. But, you know, if Commissioner Gustafson said 6 or something like that, you know, maybe you have 6, 8, something. And you can use any of them or combinations or something like that. And what they would yield, I'm not sure yet, and how they could be used together. But and then they're not restricted. You can use them anywhere in the city. And, you know, some places are going to be zoned for fewer units and some are more. But if someone's willing to take them on, like, okay, you're in a, 4-unit minimum area, whatever, what does that mean? What kind of incentives would be required? So anyway, make them broadly applicable to any square foot, any lot in the city. I did want to mention, because this has come up with some other developers on occasion, on projects that, this is very kind of code specific too, but it's related to the height incentive. If we already know a project's going in that's going to have elevators and multiple stairs, to me the height, adding an extra height, floor, whatever, is just such low-hanging fruit. A lot of developers of big projects, the 5/1 podium building type projects, would love to just add another floor, because once you got 5, 6 isn't that big a deal. You haven't moved to a different construction type yet. And they can add a lot more units with the, one more floor of elevator and the same stairs and stuff. Whereas to go an extra floor on a smaller project doesn't always pencil out because of the construction costs, but a big project can almost always handle an extra story. So I think that really shouldn't cost the city anything except maybe a little extra review time or something like that, to just grant the extra floor. It's a super easy way to add units. So I just wanted to put a plug in for that, because I think it's one of the easiest ones. We could probably just quickly say that should definitely be top of the list. Just wanted to add those things for now.
Other comments? All right, I'll make the obligatory parking comment. We have consistently supported reducing parking requirements, but we've also consistently said it needs to come with enforcement. We are seeing, I'm going to bet there are buildings that have provided parking where it costs something and those folks are on the street. And you hear about parking availability all the time. There needs to be enforcement.
And the broader city manager's office, police department, public works, finance, community development, where we're beginning that process to go through what does a parking management study look like? What does parking management look like in the long term? We anticipate it being a long time for a project to develop out that may have a reduced parking. Where we anticipate something will be built, but we're in those initial stages to go through that analysis, and we'll be reporting out, and we'll bring back that, especially if it's gonna, as required, if it affects what our development standards are, but at least for an update to what police might be doing or how we might come back with inventory. A lot of it has to do with downtown, so you'll hear that from Eric as we go through the downtown sub area update as well.
Yeah. Well, I think I could speak for the commission on this. We look forward to hearing that. Other comments? Seeing none, have you got some input you need? Anything else?
Yeah, I think this is good. We can take this, build upon what we've already done here and with City Council. Plan on coming back in September with, I I think some good numbers on what we're seeing for sort of project history, what it kind of looks like, just to get a sense of scale. Potentially what other jurisdictions are seeing as far as their history of affordable housing creation, and then with the hope that the study will be wrapped up and we'll have those incentives to really dive into and have some conversation on that. As well, we'll be talking about strategies and the policy side too. So some pretty meaty topics coming this fall, we anticipate.
Well, thank you. We'll look forward to that. Commissioner Westerbeck?
I'll keep the conversation going for just a minute because I did find the article, because this is near and dear to my heart, about stacked flats. Flats. I am a huge proponent, I'm kind of a nerd about it, that I really want to see a lot more for sale units become regularized. And right now, what you can do, like cottages, a home, townhouses. We see tons of townhouses because they can be fee simple and they fall under the International Residential Code, the easier residential code. They don't require sprinklers, so you get 4 or more by state code and things like that. So people are starting to write about this a lot more often. But we can tackle some of this as a city, even big cities. Like I think it's not in Nashville, it's someplace in Tennessee. They did things like someone wrote an article in the Urbanist not long ago about state level hurdles. They fall under the flats because they're stacked on top of each other. They fall under the commercial code versus the residential building code. That's a big hurdle. It costs a lot more money and it scares away a lot of builders who can otherwise build small stacked flat buildings. It also falls under the commercial energy code versus the residential energy code. There's not a huge difference in how well they work, but the commercial one is a lot harder to plan for and administer than the residential one. It requires a lot more information and usually experts that cost a lot of money. Versus residential, you're getting essentially the same envelope, but you can just do much easier forms and you don't have to have experts. And then the biggie, the elephant in the room, and the legislature's been chipping away at this, including this last year, condominium defect liability law. It's been getting a little more reasonable, but any design professional, construction professional actually has to pay a lot more insurance to design condos because it's been such a cottage industry for, you automatically would get sued for the last 30 years or so if you did condos. It was just, there's literally attorneys, that's just their only business. It's, I think, lessening, and that's not happening on small projects so much, but so that's going to have to keep changing at the state level. But we could do things at the city that would affect the residential energy code and building code that are under our purview to do with our building official over time that might begin to loosen the floodgates a little bit for ownership condominium flats, because a townhouse costs a lot more to build and to sell than, say a 750 square foot, essentially an apartment that gets to be sold as a condo or a co-op or something. We're starting to see co-ops around the state too as a way to do inexpensive shared housing. So I think there are things we can do as a city that are more creative that other cities have explored to get more ownership housing. Because not everyone's going to be able to go do a cute little cottage in a cottage court, which is essentially a standalone single-family home, or a townhouse or single-family home. And we're really limited to the kind of ownership housing we can developers are willing to build without getting sued. So anyway, I won't keep going on, but we really have to find a way to do those stacked flats and be able to sell them. I want my kids to be able to own something someday, and right now it's probably going to have to be a stacked flat. We just got to figure out how they could build one and could own one. So I just wanted to add that.
All right, any final comments? Looking around, seeing none, I think that closes this study session. So thank you for bringing this to us. We appreciate the work staff's done on this project, and look forward to hearing more. So thank you. On to reports from members. Do we have any reports? I'll just make a comment. I troll some of these sites locally that talk about issues, and one of the things that comes up is close your main streets. And there was a comment recently, name any other city that closed their main street. Well, I just went to Eastern Washington and go to Leavenworth. Okay, the main drag there is closed, and I'll pull in the parking. There's no free parking in Leavenworth. All the street parking is metered, and you go in, you do what you're going to do, have your sausage and beer, and then move on and open up that space. So it is possible to make these things work. The other thing I'll say is we were there on a Wednesday during the school year, and the streets were pretty full. And there was a group of kids playing, probably a school group, playing music out there, just creating activity. So it definitely, I think Bothell is going that way. I look forward to us continuing to move in that direction, but it's a pleasure when it's done right. So, a comment. Any other comments from members? Okay. Reports from staff.
Just our next regularly scheduled meeting will be July 2nd, where there'll be a briefing, a study session on the climate action plan, the draft climate action plan. And then as Jacqueline mentioned in our presentation, the phase 2 code amendments are going to City Council scheduled for ordinance decision on July 8th. So that's the parking minimums, neighborhood scale, commercial, lot coverage, consolidation, and a few others. So.
And as a reminder, we do not have meetings in August, correct?
That is correct. We will just have the July 2nd and then the July 16th meetings in next month.
So for planning purposes, we won't be here in August. All right. Thank you. So if that is it, being no further business, is there a motion to adjourn?
Commissioner Robinson, motion to adjourn.
Moves, is there a second?
Commissioner Lever, second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 All right, the meeting is adjourned at 7:07. Our next meeting will be July 2nd. Thank you all for attending, and again, thank you to staff for an excellent presentation and your continued work on this very important topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.